I'm already regretting this decision, and the first video hasn't even gone live yet. So yesterday, I brought you the best books that I've read this year. Let's be incredibly negative today and spill a load of tea. Haven't actually got any tea here with me. You're just gonna have to pretend that I've got tea. But anyway, here are the books that made me lose faith in humanity. I won't be covering all the books that made me disappointed or angry or frustrated this year. There weren't that many that I had a really dramatic reaction to, but there were loads of books that I just found completely meh. But I'll only be talking about the ones I think I can actually say something funny about because I need views. Many of these books will have videos done about them because I like ranting and rant reviews get views, so it's just all about the views. All about the views, no trouble. So the first book we're going to be talking about is Princess of Souls by Alexandra Christo. And the thing I hated about this book, above anything at all, is that it does absolutely nothing new. It is a cardboard cutout of a generic young adult fantasy, and it makes me mad because it gives YA fantasy a bad name. At this point, you really need to stop me from reading young adult fantasy because I never really like it anymore. When it slaps hard. When it fails, it fails. But back to Princess of Souls, I did make an entire rant review, so if you want more detailed thoughts, click up there. If you told me that this book was a first draft, I'd be like, okay, but you needed some serious editing, but it was still published. There was an editor, apparently. I don't think they really did much work. I'd recommend this book if you like characters with no personality whatsoever. They didn't have any discernible personality trait, apart from like Knox being arrogant. He was like a pretty arrogant Whatsit. Didn't realise Whatsits have personality. I mean, a literal Whatsit would have more personality than this guy. But yeah, this was really terrible. But it wasn't funny terrible, it was just terrible. Honestly, the first red flag for this book should have been that Celestra has green hair. I mean, come on. Next book that saddens me to have given 1 star, it's another young adult fantasy. This is The Witch King by H.E. Edgmon, which I should have liked, but I didn't. But let's start by quoting this book. Oh, the writing was so bad. Okay, let's quote this book. I am going to straight up lose it. I'm gonna straight up lose it with the amount of books I didn't enjoy this year. This is another one that feels like a first draft. The world building was sparse. Did the characters have any personality? I don't think so. The writing was, like I was saying, really bad. So many descriptions will be phrased like start of description because of course. For example, he was wearing a green shirt because of course. I really don't want to be throwing daggers in this book. There's a lot of really good representation in this, and this book is targeted at teenagers, and I think that's great. It's just a shame that it was really bad. I thought I would at least be handing this book like a 4-star rating and a metaphorical handshake to the author. But instead, I will be avoiding the author at all costs. My 2-star list on the story graph is a lot of controversial books. I'm actually trembling in I'm not wearing boots. What can I say I'm trembling in? I have to listen to this every day. I'm going to try and prioritise books that I haven't already talked about because I don't want the content to feel repetitive at all. I'm literally so sad about this one. This particular one was not for me. I'm scared to even say that I didn't like I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. I already had a very low interest in this one because it's about music, it's about fame, which are 2 things that I'm just not interested in. I always praise Alice Oseman's books for their realism. Her books really do feel like being a teenager in the UK, which is an experience I have lived because I am from the UK, if you couldn't already tell by my accent. But this one just did not feel very realistic. That's just not realistic. The writing wasn't particularly brilliant. Our other books I think are better written than this. I also just didn't really care about the characters, which in a contemporary novel, when you're just kind of getting the characters, that's kind of all you're getting. It is a big problemo. I don't dislike Alice Oseman. I really like everything else she's written. The reward for the most mediocre end to a series ever is Library of Souls by Ransom. This was just so bland. Like, the characters just had no personality. And the characters we were introduced just kind of felt like a bit caricature-y. I thought they wouldn't be in it for that long because of just how they were written, but they ended up being in it for far longer than I thought. Also, the plot just wasn't interesting. I just didn't care, and I'm very happy to be done with this series. There are 3 more books, but this is itself a trilogy, and then there's another trilogy. I won't be continuing on, which is really sad because I really liked the first book. It kind of just fell off for me. I don't really remember very much about it because there wasn't really much to say. 1984 by George Orwell. I'm gonna get absolutely dragged by all the smart classics people in the comments. Let me tell you why. And let me also tell you, which will soften the blow, I loved Animal Farm by George Orwell when I read it a couple of years ago. This one, it had incredibly interesting ideas. I would love to read some essays by George Orwell. That's what I feel like this book should have been, almost. Like, this book is basically about an affair. The ending was really chilling. I have to say, the ending was probably my favourite part about this book. But honestly, I found it boring. Okay, Velvet Was the Night by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This is pitched as a 1970s Mexico noir, which is a kind of subcategory of a thriller. Basically nothing happened in this. The plot was just really messily done and just, it wasn't intriguing at all. Also, it took me like 5 days to finish a 278-page book, and that's when you know it's not good. The Institutionist by Colson, Whitehead. This was quite a bizarre book. It's about magical elevators, and the main character is an elevator surveyor person. It sounded really interesting, and based on the sort of weird books that I like, I thought I would really enjoy it. But I was wrong, and for once, I do actually agree with the low rating. I'd say that the reason I didn't like this book was a case of me, not the book. We were kind of two people that on paper should have been friends, but in reality we just did not gel at all. I couldn't get into it. Kind of hate books like that because they don't make good content. Because I like tearing apart all the terrible things that a book's done. Oh boy, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie. Another unpopular opinion I'm going to get absolutely murdered for. And first of all, I want to say the cover is fantastic. Whoever designed the cover, but the book was not an incredible work of art. And this time I do know why that was. I think my biggest complaint with this book was the fact that it was written in first person, when it really would have been so much better if it had been written in third, because then you would have got a incredible spanning of the world, and it would have just felt so much more whimsical in like a Studio Ghibli film. But the fact that we were trapped in this character's head just really made me struggle to get a sense of what was going on. Also, there was a really terrible romance plot thread that just, you could have taken it out of the book and it would have done absolutely nothing to advance the plot. It was just unnecessary. I feel like the author only put it in because it's a young adult book, and for selling's sake, it needed to have a romance in it. It's so predictable when you read a book and it's like, it's got a romance in it. Because of course it has. Just like The Witch King, it had some romance in it. Because of course it did. The Sense of an Ending by Julian. This is a case of a book starting off really well. It was very well written. I really did like the writing. And then it just really fell off. Because this is one of my mum's favourite books. Sorry, mother. I found myself both irritated and bored by the main character. I mean, he's called Tony, so what do you expect? He just wasn't interesting. And when he was trying to be interesting, I just found him boring. Like, I highly doubt I will ever think about this book again, unless to say that I didn't really like it. But this thing won the Booker Prize, so what do I know? More generic young adult fantasy. Except this one actually had a kind of unique premise besides the missing brother plotline, which is in every single book, or most books anyway. It started off pretty good. Like, I was quite enjoying it. I thought it'd be a reasonably decent book. The writing is fairly choppy, not bland. But at around the 300-page count, I was served up a plate of the most boring, dull, I've seen it 10 billion times before, villain. And quite honestly, I wanted a refund. But I read this book after the time that I had to return it, so fortunately that couldn't happen. My compliments very much did not go to the chef, unless they were insults seething with disappointment. I will actually stop after we cover the most recent book that I did not like. And once again, I really should have liked this, because I really like book 1 in the series, but this is just kind of classic second book syndrome for me. A Restless Truth by Freya Marske. Right from the first chapter, there was something just a little bit off with this one. It took me until I finished the book to kind of figure out what that was. But anyway, I have a few suggestions why, and I kind of feel like it's a combination of all these things that made me not particularly enjoy this book. First of all, let's cover the atmosphere. So this book is set on a ship. It's pitched as, well, it's just pitched as Knives Out on a ship. But it's set in the Edwardian era, which is a big buzzword for me. That's kind of why I like the first one. Often I just forgot we were on this ship which is quite sad considering the whole thing is that it's set on a ship. And like there's a murder on this boat, and it should have felt really claustrophobic because you're in this isolated setting. Like you can't really go for help because you're literally surrounded by sea. As far as your eye can see, it's sea. Number 2 is too many underdeveloped characters. I had such a hard time keeping track of all these characters and how they link together and how they link to the characters of the first book. I mean, granted, I was probably at a disadvantage because I hadn't reread the first book before I went to this, but all good sequels kind of summarize just a little bit about what happened in the first book. A character list would have been brilliant. Number 3 was poor pacing. We find out who's kind of behind it quite early on. There's still like 160 pages to go and we already kind of know who's done it. It shouldn't feel like we've gone through the motions really fast in like a 400-page book. And number 4, there was also a romantic relationship at the forefront of this book. In the first one, it was actually done pretty well. In this one, they're already thinking about kissing each other at the 100-page mark. It wasn't really instant love because they didn't really have like an instant attraction. They just sort of met each other and then they were thinking about kissing each other, but they didn't really say, they're really hot, ha 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 ha. I don't really know how flirting works, I've never tried it before. I also kind of felt like this book was a bit irrelevant. Like I feel like you probably could skip this book, go to the last one, and the series arc would still make sense. Those are all the books that were my worst that I haven't talked about. If you want to see all of the other worst books, you just check back on my channel and watch some of my older videos. You will hear about the books that I didn't like. That is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed all of my insults that I've been dishing out to these books. Please subscribe, share with your friends because I would like some views, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.